Oh, no. I'm not gonna dress up like a girl.
Oh, yes, you are, and that's an order.
I'm not gonna dress up like a girl, and you can't make me. You can't make me. You can't make me.
We already did.
60 years is a long time. Most things are forgotten, but not these shows. The sitcoms of the 1960s were more than just entertainment. They were cultural events hiding unbelievable truths. We're exploring 20 of these classics, and the stories behind them are wild. You see, one of the most famous cartoons ever was not even made for children in the first place. 1. The Andy Griffith Show.
You see, if you're not familiar with firearms, these babies can go off. Now,
Let's take a peaceful stroll down to Mayberry, a town that felt like the most wholesome place on earth. The Andy Griffith Show was all about Sheriff Andy Taylor, his son Opie, and his goofy deputy, Barney Fife. The show was a giant hit because it felt so calm and friendly. It was like a warm blanket. For 8 years, it was one of the most watched shows in America. In fact, it was so popular that it ended its final season as the #1 show on television, something very few shows ever managed to do. But here is something most people do not know. The relationship between Andy Griffith and Don Knotts, who played Barney, was the heart of the show. Their chemistry was pure magic. The thing is, Don Knotts was originally only supposed to be in one episode. He saw the pilot and called Andy, suggesting the sheriff could use a deputy. Andy agreed, and the rest is history. Knotts won 5 Emmy Awards for his role. But after the 5th season, he left the show. Andy had told him he was only planning on doing 5 seasons, so Don signed a movie contract. When Andy decided to keep the show going, Don was already locked into his movie deal and could not come back full-time. The show was never quite the same without him. Losing a character as beloved as Barney Fife would have destroyed most shows. But Mayberry survived. Yet not every show relied on gentle, small-town humor. Some found their laughs in the most unusual of families, like a household made of stone. 2. The Flintstones.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, they're the modern Stone Age family.
Now let's travel way, way back in time to the Stone Age town of Bedrock. The Flintstones was a cartoon, but it was not just for kids. To put it mildly, it was a groundbreaking show. It was the very first animated series to air in primetime, meaning it was shown at night alongside the big live-action shows. The story followed the lives of Fred and Wilma Flintstone and their best friends, Barney and Betty Rubble. It was basically a cartoon version of a classic family sitcom. What many people overlooked was who the show was really for. The creators, Hanna-Barbera, made the show for adults. The storylines were about things adults dealt with, like work, marriage, and money. And here is the real shocker. The show's first sponsor was Welch's grape juice, but also Winston cigarettes. Yes, a cartoon character, Fred Flintstone, was used to advertise cigarettes in the commercials. You could see Fred and Barney relaxing while puffing away. This would be unthinkable today, but in the 1960s, nobody batted an eye. It was a totally different time. The show was a huge success, running for 6 seasons and becoming a global sensation. It proved that cartoons could be for grown-ups, too. From the Stone Age, our next show takes us from a prehistoric family to a modern family that was, well, a little bigger than average. 3. My 3 Sons.
Hey, I bet you kids are hungry. How about some of that roast beef and apple pie, Charlie?
I don't know why I didn't think of it.
From a family with a pet dinosaur, we move to a much more normal, but still very popular family in the show, My 3 Sons. The series was about an aeronautical engineer and widower named Steve Douglas, trying to raise his 3 boys with the help of their grandfather. The show was incredibly popular because it was so relatable and heartwarming. It was a gentle show that families could watch together. The thing nobody tells you is just how long this show was on the air. It ran for a whopping 12 seasons, from 1960 all the way to 1972. That is 380 episodes, making it one of the longest-running live-action sitcoms in American history. Very few shows ever last that long, but with a run that long, you are bound to have some big changes. The three sons did not stay the same for the whole show. The original oldest son, Mike, got married and was written out of the series. To keep the title accurate, the family adopted another young boy named Ernie. But the biggest change happened behind the scenes. The first 5 seasons were filmed in black and white. For the 6th season, the show moved to a new network, CBS, and started filming in color. It was a huge deal at the time and gave the show a fresh, modern look, helping it stay popular for another 7 years. It showed that a simple family story could have incredible staying power. But not all sitcoms were about the family. Some were about the workplace. And our next one took viewers behind the scenes of a fictional TV show. 4. The Dick Van Dyke Show.
Sometimes he seems so, and then other times he just doesn't. Once he even, and for no reason, and what was I?
Imagine getting to see what happens behind the curtain of your favorite television show. That was the clever idea behind the Dick Van Dyke Show. The series starred Dick Van Dyke as Rob Petrie, the head writer for a comedy variety show. The episodes would switch between his hilarious work life with his co-workers, Buddy and Sally, and his charming home life with his wife, Laura, played by the amazing Mary Tyler Moore. The show was created by the legendary comedian Carl Reiner, and it was based on his own life as a writer for Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows. It was praised for being smarter and more sophisticated than other sitcoms of the era. But here is something wild. The show was almost canceled after its first season. The ratings were not great, and the network was ready to pull the plug. But the show's producer, Sheldon Leonard, went directly to the sponsors and begged them to give it another chance. He knew they had something special. They agreed, and the show was moved to a better time slot. It quickly found an audience and became a massive hit, winning 15 Emmy Awards. One of the most famous parts of the show was the opening credits, where Rob Petrie would either trip over an ottoman or avoid it. Fans would tune in just to see which version they would get that week. It was a small detail that showed the playful spirit of the series. From the world of television writing, our next show moves into a household where the person in charge was not a parent, but a very bossy and lovable maid. 5. Hazel.
My new shoes.
Oh, yes, you look very, comfortable.
What's the matter, Mr. B? You lost your sense of humor?
Some families are run by the parents, but the Baxter family was run by their maid, Hazel. Based on a popular comic strip, the show Hazel was about a live-in maid who worked for the Baxter family. Hazel, played by the wonderful Shirley Booth, was not your typical quiet helper. She was opinionated, she was bossy, and she always knew best. She basically ran the household, and her employers, George and Dorothy Baxter, usually just had to go along with her plans. The show was an instant smash hit. A big reason for that was Shirley Booth. She was already a famous and respected actress, having won an Oscar and a Tony Award. For her to star in a TV sitcom was a very big deal. It brought a level of star power to television that was not very common at the time. She was so perfect in the role that she won 2 Emmy Awards for playing Hazel. People loved her. But here's a little secret about the show. The character of George Baxter, the dad, was often annoyed by Hazel's meddling. The actor who played him, Don DeFore, was a very successful businessman in real life. He actually owned a string of restaurants with his brother. What many people do not realize is that the network eventually canceled the show after 4 very successful seasons, but it was so popular that another network picked it up for a 5th season. However, they made some big changes, writing out the parents and having Hazel move in with the brothers' family instead. Fans did not like the change, and that 5th season was its last. Hazel was the heart of her home. But what if the heart of your home was not a person at all, but a talking animal? 6. Mr. Ed.
Here's that Anderson contract, sir. Anything else, Mr. Post? Boss? Sir?
A show about a talking horse sounds like a silly idea, and it was. But it was also one of the most beloved shows of the 1960s. Mr. Ed was about an architect named Wilbur Post who owned a horse, Mr. Ed, who could talk. The catch was, Mr. Ed would only talk to Wilbur, which led to all sorts of crazy situations. Wilbur would be having a full conversation with his horse, and his wife or neighbors would walk in and think he had lost his mind. For years, people have wondered, how did they make the horse's lips move to look like he was talking? The show's producers kept it a secret for a long time to create a sense of magic. They would tell people that the horse was just a very smart animal, but the truth is much simpler. The trainer would put a piece of nylon thread in the horse's mouth. The horse, whose real name was Bamboo Harvester, did not like the feeling of the thread and would try to move it with his lips, which made it look like he was talking. After a while, the horse got so good at it that he would start moving his lips as soon as his co-star. Alan Young stopped speaking his lines even without the thread. The show was pure, simple fun. The theme song alone, "A Horse is a Horse, of course, is one of the most famous in television history. A talking horse was certainly strange, but our next show featured characters who were even more out of place, a pair of police officers who were, to put it mildly, not the best at their jobs. 7. Car 54, Where Are You?
And now, giddy up! Giddy up! Giddy up! Giddy up! Come on!
Before the gritty police dramas we see today, there was Car 54, Where Are You? This was a sitcom about 2 mismatched police officers in the Bronx, the tall and quiet Gunther Tootie and the short and brainy Francis Muldoon. The show was not about solving serious crimes. It was about the silly and ridiculous things that happened at their police precinct. The cops were bumbling, their captain was always yelling, and things were always going wrong. The show was created by Nat Hiken, the same man who created the legendary Phil Silvers Show. He had a real knack for creating workplace comedies with a cast of crazy characters. What made Car 54 special was its sense of humor and its memorable theme song, which just screamed New York City. The show was filmed on location in New York, which was unusual for a sitcom at the time. Most were filmed on studio lots in California. This gave the show a real, authentic feeling. But here is a fun fact that connects to another comedy legend. The 2 main actors, Joe E. Ross and Fred Gwynne, were perfect together. After Car 54 ended, Fred Gwynne would go on to star in another classic 1960s sitcom where he would play one of the most recognizable characters in TV history. You see, he was the actor who would later play the lovable monster, Herman Munster. It shows just how small the world of television was back then. From the streets of the Bronx, our next show takes us to the alleyways of Manhattan, where the main characters were not cops, but a gang of clever cats. 8. Top Cat.
Hey, whoops. Hey, DC, did you see where my arrow went?
No, I didn't see it, but I know where it went.
If you thought a talking horse was a strange idea for a show, what about a whole show about a group of talking alley cats? That was Top Cat. This animated classic from Hanna-Barbera was about a slick, fast-talking cat named TC, or Top Cat, who was the leader of a gang of Manhattan alley cats. TC was always coming up with get-rich-quick schemes, and the gang would try to pull them off. usually right under the nose of the local police officer, Officer Dibble, who was always trying to catch them. Many people think this was just another kid's cartoon, but not unlike the Flintstones, it was designed to appeal to a wider audience. The main character, Top Cat, was actually based on the same character that inspired Car 54's creator, Sergeant Bilko, from the Phil Silvers Show. TC had that same smooth-talking, scheming personality. He was a con artist, but a lovable one. The thing is, even though it is considered a classic today, Top Cat was not a big hit when it first aired in prime time. It only lasted for one season, with 30 episodes. The network thought it was too similar to the other shows about con men. But the show found a second life in reruns on Saturday mornings, where it became incredibly popular with kids. It is a great example of a show that was ahead of its time and found its true audience years later. From a gang of city cats trying to make a buck, we head to the country with a family who suddenly had more money than they knew what to do with. 9. The Beverly Hillbillies.
Are you gonna come peaceable, or do I have to take you by force?
Here is the story of a man named Jed. You probably know the rest. The Beverly Hillbillies was one of the most popular television shows of all time. The simple story was about a poor backwoods family, the Clampetts, who strike oil on their land and become millionaires overnight. They then move to a fancy mansion in Beverly Hills, California, bringing their simple country ways with them. The comedy came from the clash between the down-to-earth Clampetts and their snobby, rich neighbors. The show was an absolute monster in the ratings. To put it mildly, people were crazy about it. Within its first 2 years, it became the #1 show in the country, and some of the most watched television episodes in history are from the Beverly Hillbillies. One episode in 1964 was watched by more than half of all the television sets in America. That is a level of popularity that is almost impossible to achieve today. But here is something many people do not realize. The critics hated it. They called it stupid, silly, and lowbrow. They could not understand why so many people loved a show about a bunch of hillbillies. But the creator, Paul Henning, knew that regular people just wanted to laugh. He did not care what the critics thought. The show ran for 9 successful seasons, proving that sometimes the simplest ideas are the best. The Clampetts were a fish-out-of-water family, but our next show featured a woman who was a fish out of water in her own life, a superstar of comedy taking on a brand new role. 10. The Lucy Show.
I think we just better forget all about it. Nobody throws anybody. Agreed?
Agreed.
Put her there, pal.
After the legendary sitcom I Love Lucy ended, America's favorite redhead, Lucille Ball, was not ready to retire. She came back to television with The Lucy Show. In this new series, she played Lucy Carmichael, a widow who moves into a new house with her friend, Vivian Vance, who had famously played Ethel Mertz. The two of them were single moms trying to navigate life, and of course, getting into all sorts of hilarious and zany schemes. What many overlooked is the power Lucille Ball had behind the scenes. She was not just the star, she was the boss. The Lucy Show was produced by her company, Desilu Productions. After she and her husband Desi Arnaz went their separate ways, she bought him out and became the first woman to run a major television studio. She was one of the most powerful people in Hollywood. She called the shots, and she knew what she was doing. The show was a huge hit, but it went through a lot of changes. After 3 seasons, Vivian Vance left the series the show was, then changed to have Lucy work at a bank for a cranky boss played by Gail Gordon. The format kept changing, but one thing stayed the same. People loved watching Lucille Ball do her comedy. She was a master of physical humor, and audiences could not get enough. The show ran for 6 seasons, always staying near the top of the ratings, proving that the Queen of Comedy still had her crown. From the schemes of the 1960s, our next show blasts off into the distant future to see what family life might be like 100 years from now. 11. The Jetsons meet George Jetson.
George Jetson, time to get up.
Huh? What? What's it?
His boy, Elroy. Daughter, Judy. Jane, his wife. Welcome to the future. Just 2 years after Hanna-Barbera took us to the Stone Age with the Flintstones, they catapulted us into the year 2062 with the Jetsons. This animated sitcom was the flip side of the Flintstones coin. It was all about a family living in a futuristic world with flying cars, robot maids, and buildings that stretched high into the clouds. The show was full of amazing and imaginative gadgets. People could talk to each other on video screens, get their food from a machine with the push of a button, and have a robot Rosie clean the whole house. The thing is, many of the things that seemed like pure fantasy in 1962 have actually come true. We have video calls, smart homes, and robotic vacuums. The show was surprisingly good at predicting the future. But here is the kicker. Just like Top Cat, The Jetsons was not a big hit when it first aired. It only lasted for 1 season in primetime. It was shown in color, which was very rare at the time, but most people still had black and white TVs, so they could not even appreciate the beautiful, vibrant animation. The show became a massive hit years later in Saturday morning reruns. It was so popular in the 1980s that the studio actually produced brand new episodes to continue the story. It was a show that was truly ahead of its time, in more ways than one. From the far-flung future, our next show takes us back in time to World War II, but it found comedy in the most unlikely of places. 12. McHale's Navy.
Hey, Chuck, what are you doing here? I was here with Captain Binghamton. He made me come, Skip, and he saw you and Fuji talking together. What? Holy Hannah!
You would not think a show set during World War II could be a comedy, but McHale's Navy proved everyone wrong. The show was about the crew of a PT boat in the Pacific. They were supposed to be fighting the war, but they spent most of their time goofing off, running get-rich-quick schemes, and trying to hide it all from their frustrated, by-the-book commanding officer, Captain Binghamton. The crew was led by the lovable conman, Lieutenant Commander McHale, played by the Oscar-winning actor Ernest Borgnine. The show was pure slapstick fun. It was less about the war and more about a bunch of guys trying to have a good time and avoid doing any real work. Think of it as Sergeant Bilko on a boat. Captain Binghamton was always trying to catch McHale and his men breaking the rules. But he was always outsmarted, which led to his famous catchphrase of frustration, "I could just scream." What many people do not know is that the show was so popular that it led to 2 full-length movies. It also had a spin-off. But the spin-off was not about another boat crew. The network created a show called Broadside, which was basically the same idea as McHale's Navy, but it was about a group of women in the Navy. It was a bold idea for the time, but it did not catch on and only lasted for 1 season. McHale's Navy, however, sailed on for 4 seasons of goofy wartime fun. From the open ocean, our next show brings us back to dry land, to a small country hotel with a very unusual main attraction. 13. Petticoat Junction.
Love can happen any place, Billy. Who knows if Prince Charming could come walking right through that door?
All aboard for Hooterville. Petticoat Junction was another hit rural comedy from Paul Henning, the same creator of the Beverly Hillbillies. The show was set at the Shady Rest Hotel, run by Kate Bradley and her 3 beautiful daughters, Billy Jo, Bobby Jo, and Betty Jo. The hotel was located along a small forgotten railway line, and a lot of the show's action revolved around the daily run of the Hooterville Cannonball, a quirky old steam train. The show was part of a shared universe of shows. Characters from Petticoat Junction would often appear on the Beverly Hillbillies and another show called Green Acres. It was one of the first times a TV producer created a world where different shows could cross over, something that is very common today with superhero movies. The heart of the show was the family and the charming, simple life in the country. But the show is also famous for something else. The three daughters were a huge part of the show's appeal. However, the actress playing the oldest daughter, Billie Jo, was changed. The first actress left after 2 seasons, and she was replaced. Then, a few seasons later, that second actress was replaced by a third one. So, over the course of the show, there were 3 different actresses who played the exact same character. It was a revolving door of daughters at the Shady Rest Hotel. A country hotel and its quirky train were strange enough. But our next show featured a main character who was, quite literally, out of this world. 14. My Favorite Martian.
Welcome to the O'Hara family.
Thank you, my boy. Well, I guess that makes me the first Irishman from the planet Mars.
Long before we had aliens like E.T. or Alf, there was Uncle Martin. My Favorite Martian was a sitcom about a newspaper reporter named Tim O'Hara who discovers a crashed spaceship. The pilot is a friendly Martian with retractable antennae and special powers, like the ability to read minds and become invisible. Tim takes the Martian home to live with him, telling everyone that he is his Uncle Martin. The show's comedy came from Uncle Martin trying to hide his alien identity and his powers from the rest of the world. The show was a big hit for its first 2 seasons. It was a fun and imaginative fantasy sitcom. The special effects used to show Uncle Martin's powers were simple but very clever for the time. The actor who played the Martian, Ray Walston, was brilliant. He played the character as being very sophisticated and intelligent, which made it even funnier when he had to deal with the silliness of human life. But here is something that happened behind the scenes. For the show's 3rd and final season, the network decided they wanted to shake things up. They introduced a new character, a nosy police detective who was determined to expose Uncle Martin's secret. They also started filming in color. The problem was, the new color filming process was very expensive, and the special effects were much harder and more costly to produce in color. The show's budget ballooned, and the network decided it was just too expensive to keep making. So, after 3 seasons, Uncle Martin fixed his spaceship and flew home for good. An alien trying to fit in was a great idea. But what if you had 2 people who looked exactly alike but were complete opposites? Our next show explored that very idea. 15. The Patty Duke Show.
You mean you'll do the cooking? Mm-hmm. What are you planning?
To stuff a goose.
Get ready for double trouble. The Patty Duke Show starred young actress Patty Duke in 2 roles. She played 2 identical cousins. First, there was Patty Lane, a typical rock and roll-loving American teenager from Brooklyn. Then there was Kathy Lane, her cousin from Scotland, who was proper, prim, and very sophisticated. Kathy comes to live with Patty's family in America, and the 2 of them, despite looking exactly alike, could not be more different. The show was a huge technical challenge for the 1960s. To have one actress play 2 characters who often appeared on screen at the same time required a lot of camera tricks. They used split screens and body doubles to pull off the effect. It was very impressive for the time. The theme song explained the whole idea perfectly, with the lyrics, "But they're cousins, identical cousins all the way." What many people do not realize is just how young Patty Duke was. She was only 16 years old when the show started. And just before that, she had won an Academy Award for her role in the movie The Miracle Worker. She was a huge star. The show was even created specifically for her by a writer who was so impressed with her talent. The show ran for 3 seasons and was a big hit with teenagers. It was a sweet and funny show that rested entirely on the shoulders of its talented young star. From identical cousins to a magical wife, our next show introduced a twitching nose that would become one of the most famous gestures in television history. 16. Bewitched.
Answer to your question, I already have a diamond ring.
Then why don't you wear it?
I am wearing it.
What if your wife could get anything she wanted just by twitching her nose? That was the magical premise of Bewitched. The show starred Elizabeth Montgomery as Samantha, a beautiful witch who marries a mortal man, an advertising executive named Darren Stevens. She promises to give up magic and live a normal suburban life, but she can never quite manage it. Her magical relatives, especially her mischievous mother Endora, are always popping in and causing chaos, forcing Samantha to use her powers to clean up the mess. The show was an enormous hit. People loved the clever writing, the funny situations, and the charming performance of Elizabeth Montgomery. The magic on the show was done with some very creative camera tricks, sound effects, and wires. When a character would magically pop into a room, for example, the director would yell, "Freeze!" All the actors would hold perfectly still. The magical character would walk onto the set, and the director would yell, "Action!" It was simple, but it worked perfectly. But here is something many people talk about, the so-called bewitched curse. You see, a surprising number of the actors who had major roles on the show faced deep personal struggles or passed away at unexpectedly young ages. Elizabeth Montgomery herself passed away from cancer. The actors who played her mother Endora, her Uncle Arthur, and her nosy neighbor Gladys Kravitz all had serious health problems. It is probably just a sad coincidence, but it has become a strange and spooky legend associated with this otherwise happy and magical show. A magical wife was one thing, but what if you were just stuck on an island with a bunch of goofballs? Our next show took that simple idea and turned it into a television legend. 17. Gilligan's Island.
The skipper wanted me to be skipper if anything happened to the skipper. And I'm gonna be skipper because that's the way the skipper wanted it. Any questions?
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip. Almost everyone in America knows the theme song to Gilligan's Island. The story is as simple as it gets. 7 castaways get shipwrecked on a deserted island after their tour boat, the SS Minnow, is caught in a storm. The group included the clumsy first mate Gilligan, the skipper, a millionaire and his wife, a movie star, the professor, and the sweet girl next door, Mary Ann. The show was pure, silly fun. Every week, the castaways would try to get rescued, but Gilligan would somehow mess it up at the last second. They would build elaborate contraptions out of bamboo and coconuts, and they would often meet strange visitors who would land on their island. The show was a huge hit with audiences who loved its simple, slapstick humor. But just like the Beverly Hillbillies, the critics absolutely despised it. They called it the dumbest show on television. The creator of the show, Sherwood Schwartz, did not care. He knew people wanted to escape their problems and laugh. But here is the truly shocking part. The show was canceled after 3 seasons, even though it was still a top 10 hit. A powerful network executive wanted to keep his favorite Western show on the air, so he had Gilligan's Island canceled to make room for it. The cast and crew did not even know they were canceled until they saw the new fall schedule. It was a brutal end for a much-loved show.